Here's the thing nobody tells you when you move into a small apartment or a house with a postage stamp yard. The Japanese have been solving this exact problem for over 1,000 years. And the solutions they came up with are so effective, so counterintuitive, that Western gardening culture basically pretended they didn't exist. We're calling them illegal, because they break every rule your local garden center lives by. Buy bigger pots, plant more, give everything space. All of that? Throw it out. Let's get into it. Trick number 1 is called espalier, and the Japanese borrowed and perfected it into something called tanazukuri shelf training. The idea is simple and slightly insane. Instead of letting a fruit tree grow outward in 3 dimensions, you train it to grow flat, against a wall. In 2 dimensions, you take a young apple, pear, or fig tree, and as it grows, you tie its branches horizontally along wires or a trellis fixed to a wall or fence. Every branch that wants to grow toward you or away from the wall gets pinched off. What you end up with is essentially a living painting on your wall, a tree that's 4 inches deep, 6 feet wide, and producing actual fruit. The wall does something critical here. Brick and concrete absorb heat during the day and release it at night, creating a microclimate that's 2 to 4 degrees warmer than open air. In Japan, this trick let gardeners grow citrus in regions that should have been too cold. In your case, it means you can grow a full fruit tree on a 6-inch wide balcony ledge, or along a fence you'd otherwise just look at. One apple tree trained this way can produce 50 to 100 apples a year, in a space a yoga mat would be embarrassed to fit into. Trick number 2 comes from the Japanese concept of shake, which translates to borrowed scenery. But there's a food growing application of this principle that almost nobody talks about. The idea is that your growing space doesn't end at your property line. Experienced Japanese kitchen gardeners would deliberately plant climbing vegetables, cucumbers, bitter melon, yard-long beans, so they grew up and over fences, pergolas, and overhead structures. The plant roots stay in a small container on your site. The canopy grows outward and upward, turning dead airspace into productive growing volume. Here's the math. A standard 1-2-inch pot sitting on a balcony takes up about 0.8 square feet of floor space. But a cucumber plant from that pot, trimmed up a vertical string and allowed to sprawl overhead, can occupy 20 to 30 square feet of airspace. You are farming the ceiling. Most people never look up. Japanese bitter melon Goya is particularly good at this. It grows fast, it creates a dense green curtain that actually insulates your space in summer, and it produces heavily. In Okinawa, these living curtains covering south-facing walls are called green curtains, and they're credited with reducing indoor temperatures by up to 10 degrees Fahrenheit. You get food and air conditioning from one pot. Trick number 3 is the one that will make your gardening friends deeply uncomfortable. It's called konteina saibai, and it's the Japanese method of extreme container stacking. The rule you've been told is that each plant needs its own pot, and pots need space between them. The Japanese rule is the opposite. Stack your growing vertically, layer by layer, using what they call a 3-story garden. The bottom layer is shade-tolerant crops, mitsuba, shiso, wasabi greens, or in Western terms, mint, sorrel, or spinach. These sit in low containers at ground level or on the floor. The middle layer, elevated on a shelf or stacked crates, gets partial sun plants, lettuce, kale, strawberries. The top layer, which catches full direct sun, is where your heavy hitters go. Tomatoes, peppers, herbs like basil that genuinely need heat. Each layer shades the one below it, which is exactly what those lower plants want. You've created a micro-habitat stack in the footprint of a single bookshelf. In Tokyo, where a square meter of apartment balcony space costs as much as a car payment, this is how people grow year-round produce. Some Tokyo residents produce 30% of their vegetable consumption from a 10 square foot balcony using this method alone. Trick number 4 is succession planting taken to an extreme. The Japanese call it rimen saibai, or continuous surface use, and it means your containers never sit empty. Most gardeners plant, harvest, and then let the pot rest. Japanese kitchen gardeners treat every container like real estate with a mortgage. The moment one crop comes out, something else goes in, or better yet, a second crop was started 2 weeks ago in a smaller pot, already ready to drop in the moment the first one finishes. The specific trick here is this. Grow your next crop in a small biodegradable cup set inside the main pot, beside the current plant. When the main plant is pulled, you have a fully rooted successor already acclimated to the spot. Zero downtime, zero transition shock. In a tiny space, This can effectively double your output from the same number of containers without buying anything extra. You are just refusing to let your pots be idle. Trick number 5 is the oldest and strangest of all, and it comes from the practice of niwaki, the art of cloud pruning trees. But applied to food production, it becomes something called dwarf high-density planting. The principle is this: a plant's size is not fixed. It is a negotiation between the plant and the gardener. Japanese horticulturalists figured out centuries ago that by consistently root pruning container plants, literally taking the plant out of the pot every 2 years, cutting back the roots by a third, and repotting in the same container, you can keep a full-sized fruit tree at a miniature scale indefinitely. A fig tree that will grow 20 feet tall in the ground stays happily at 3 feet in a container if you root prune it regularly. It still flowers. It still fruits. It just does it at 15% of the size it would otherwise reach. This is the science behind bonsai, applied to your food supply. And it works on figs, lemons, limes, olives, pomegranates, and blueberries. You can keep 4 different fruit trees on the balcony that most people would call unusable for growing anything. The common thread through all 5 of these tricks is the same idea. Space is not a fixed quantity. It's a dimension you can negotiate with, expand upward, borrow from walls and ceilings and air, and use more efficiently than you ever thought possible. The Japanese didn't develop these techniques because they were clever, though they were. They developed them because they had to, and that constraint produced something better than any amount of space would have. Start with one of these. Just one. Pick whichever one fits where you live. And then, watch what happens when you stop treating your limitations as limits.